Okay, here for your viewing pleasure, we have a brief history of the atom. We'll be summarizing the work of several of the key philosophers and scientists over the last couple of millennia. These include, starting at the top, Democritus, working around to Aristotle, there's my arrow, following up with Al-Ghazali, Lavoisier, Dalton, Thomson, Rutherford, and some very recent contributions by Igor Mikhailovsky. This is Screencast 4.5. Okay, sorry for that delay. Okay, beginning in 400 BC, Democritus suggested that the atom existed. What was his evidence? Nothing at all. Was he the only philosopher to suggest it? No, not really. Leucippus, his predecessor, suggested it. Other philosophers such as Canada from India suggested it, but a lot of people were starting to think that the world is made out of some tiny indivisible particles. Aristotle suggested that something different was going on. He suggested that the universe was composed of elements that he called air, fire, earth, and water. Well, the universe is composed of air, fire, earth, and water, but those are the phases that any element can exist in. Ghazali in the Middle Ages suggested that someday we will split the atom, and in fact, we've been doing that ever since the mid-20th century. Lavoisier had a scientific instrument, a precise double-pan balance. With this, he was able to gather quantitative data that led him to conclude, among other things, that matter is always conserved in a chemical reaction, suggesting that the atom is indestructible. Dalton performed a variety of experiments, suggested a lot of basic concepts about the atom, including the fact that atoms seem to always combine in small whole numbers to make molecules. This leads to the concept of a chemical bond. Thomson really took it a revolutionary step further when he found evidence that there's something within an atom that is 1,000 times smaller. We now know it as the electron, and it's perhaps the single most important concept in understanding all chemical behavior is where those electrons are, particularly in the outer shell. Rutherford figured out that shells, or some sort of system outside the nucleus, must exist. This was based on his gold foil experiment. And I really shouldn't use the term shells. That was left to somebody who would be in between here, Niels Bohr, who we're omitting from this brief history. We're going to fast forward all the way to about 2010, where some modern-day imaging is taking place in the laboratories of Igor Mikhailovsky, who is still actively involved in research. And he was one of the first scientists to actually see images of these, what are now known as atomic orbitals, within the atom. This is a brief history of the atom, Screencast 4.5.